Hello, and thank you everybody for joining us again here at the Magnolia Chamber of Commerce. We are pleased to have with us today Bruce Harrell, who's running for mayor of Seattle. Bruce, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely my pleasure, Jason.
And if you would just kind of introduce yourself, your background and why you're running for mayor.
Sure, and I'll hum a few bars. So I'm a native son here. I was born in Seattle and went to Garfield High School and University of Washington for college and law school. A local product of good policies, I would say. And so I've been able to work as an attorney in the telecom and technology industry for a number of years, in addition to managing a small to mid-sized law firm downtown Seattle. Doing a lot of work with nonprofits, for technology companies, for churches. And so when I got elected, I've been elected to Seattle politics 3 times. And when I got elected, I came out with pretty much a platform, much like what I'm talking about now. That is a strong jobs and economic development, strong and effective public safety, strong educational policies. And I'm biracial, and so I talk on the campaign trail that my African American grandparents came to Seattle in the 40s for jobs and opportunity in housing, and my Japanese side on my mother's side came here for the precise same things: jobs, opportunity, and housing. And so I am running for mayor because I am, quite candidly, I think the city's starving for effective and strong leadership. I think the city is starving for decisiveness, data-based decisions, looking at where we are heading as a city and where we need to go. I think they're seeing tents everywhere and inaction at City Hall, often indecisiveness and inefficiencies. And so I'm hopeful that my background lends itself toward very clear and methodical policies to get us back on the right track. And so I'm excited about our candidacy and look forward to any questions you may have, Jason.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So as for those who are maybe watching this video first, we state in all the videos that we provided a questionnaire for the candidates, and they were very gracious to fill that out and share where they stand on some very key policies and such. In this interview, we want to basically run through those same questions, keep them uniform, but for you, the listener, to be able to hear the heart of each of the candidates. So we're going to walk through each of those questions one at a time, and they cover about 4 different general topics. So the first one that was on the questionnaire, Bruce, was what distinct leadership strengths would you as a person bring to City Hall if elected as mayor? And, what are some examples of those strengths?
Well, I think I bring a spirit of leadership and humility. And I say that to say that right now, I don't think the city's looking for a mayor that comes in heavy-handed and says, I have all the answers. I think what they're looking for is someone that will listen, will do the research, do the hard work, roll up their sleeves and find out what are other cities doing that is working. I've said publicly that coming out of this post-pandemic era, there will be winners and losers in cities, that there is a jobs war, and that we must be mindful that small businesses and mid-sized businesses and businesses generally who provide jobs, that there will be winners and losers. And so what it's very clear is that we have to have all of the right policies in place, and whether those are climate change policies, educational policies, public safety policies, that we have to make sure that the city of Seattle is back on the right direction. And so I think I bring a proven track record. If you look at the legislation that I've sponsored and I've led, and whether these are transportation issues or economic development issues, the fact of the matter is I'm pretty candid. And when I was mayor for those 5 glorious days in city's history, one of the first things I said was, well, look around and our city is filthy. I mean, there's garbage everywhere. And this is not the city that I recall taking pride in. And I talked about, at this point, Amazon is looking for a second location. And I put out an executive order that we should, in this region, apply. And not that I'm saying that Amazon has done everything they need to do as a corporate citizen. I'm not suggesting that by any stretch of the imagination. We want them to be a better corporate citizen. But I don't like the constant bashing of businesses and economic development. And I wanted to send a strong message that jobs matter. From the janitor and the security guard to officer level positions, jobs matter. And so part of my candidacy is that proven record, not backing down from rhetoric and being clear and focused on what I think will make a great city different. And, I had public safety officers, police officers at my kickoff when I announced at Garfield High School many weeks ago now. And I did that to say that, I didn't subscribe to the defund the police narrative, that in all of the work that I've done in pursuing a master's degree in organizational design and improvement, nothing in my formal teaching or informal teaching would suggest that if you want a department to be effective, good cops, 7-minute response times, impressing upon the employees and employers and neighborhoods a sense of safety, that you starve it from resources. That is not my approach at all. Yes, we want to get rid of bad cops, and bad cops are just not those who commit acts of violence against people. They're also cops that do not build community trust and do not build relationships in our neighborhoods and make all communities feel safe. And so under my candidacy, which I think is quite distinct, I come up, you can't talk to me a lot about police reform. I mean, I've cross-examined police officers on the stand, and so I know what it means to deal with bad officers. But, again, what makes my candidacy different, I think, is that we will talk about changing the culture, but being more effective. So business revitalization work, jobs creation work, strong educational policies to feed into it through my Seattle Job Center and the continuation of Seattle Promise, and effective public safety. I think my platform is quite distinct than others.
Thank you. So the next question we'd ask was, if you were to be elected mayor, how would you work alongside city council to address numerous concerns that are in Seattle right now, things such as increasing affordable housing, reducing crime, promoting public safety, encouraging and supporting small business growth? What would you do specifically to promote a working relationship with city council to get some of those things done?
Yeah, I'll approach that question sort of twofold. One is structurally that it's my intention to put $10 million of our $1.5 billion subfund, $10 million of existing money into each of the 7 council members' budget for him or her to work with the communities to decide their priorities. And that could be small business assistance, public safety. It could be garbage cleanup and debris cleanup. And the reason I want to do that is because I want the city council members, since we have moved by district, I want to change the way we do business. And I want them to be responsible to their neighborhoods and their constituents. And I think that's going to bring about a different skill set as well, that people have to respond responsive to the needs of their districts, as opposed to simply pushing some of the major components of our system, such as garbage retrieval or small business development or preservation, economic development, just pushing that toward the mayor. I want the city council members to have skin in the game. Number 2 is I work very, very hard to talk to either my critics or other council members. I spend, I was, I think, one of the 4th council members to be elected city council president twice. And my style of leadership is not that I'm trying to outdo a council member or outshine a council member. I want to give them victories, him or her victories, to the extent we're aligned and we see things in common. And my guess would be most of the time we do, but on some issues of policy and implementation, we may not. But regardless as to whether we do or we do not, I will make sure that I have a very intentional relationship with each council member. And again, I will meet council members in their office, which is on the 2nd floor that I know very well, not the 7th floor. And I will meet them in their communities where they may be as well. So I will be very intentional about having constructive relationships and building wins. I'm confident, it's just, I guess in my nature, I'm confident that I will work on what we have in common. And I talk about this during racial discussions, that yes, we celebrate diversity and we respect each other's differences. But I also like spending an equal amount of time on what we have in common. And my guess would be, if I spend any time with anyone for any length of time, we're going to delve into what we like in common. It could be similar books, similar hobbies, our attitudes toward our family members, good or bad, by the way. But we need to celebrate our commonality as well as our diversity. And that's why with the council, I will be very intentional about building those relationships, not just throwing stones at them or receiving stones from them.
Nice. Thank you. So, what would you, if elected mayor, like to see from organizations such as local chambers in terms of working positively, proactively with you and your office? And how could someone like a Magnolia Chamber of Commerce really be an asset to the new mayor?
And that's a great question. And I want to give a full disclosure that that I believe that the small business community and the small landlord community, many of whom can't show up at City Hall to give testimony or meet with their favorite elected official, that their voice really needs to be at the table. And we have to realize that, again, I manage small businesses, that cash flow is king, and you have to meet payroll and pay insurance and pay your overhead. And so you may not have by any stretch of the imagination, a full-time lobbyist or political strategist to work those angles. And so it's incumbent upon the city to meet you where you are. And so you're asking, what can the chamber do? In this case, Magnolia Chamber. And what I'm saying is what the city needs to do is build a better bridge to make sure your voice is at the table. So I want to put formal structure around that in our Office of Economic Development. Again, recognizing that many just don't have the time, resources, or energy to do that. So having said that again, you're doing what we need done. You are making sure that you have a consortium of businesses, different voices, making your needs known, whether strong public safety, strong business-to-business relationships, and that could be a small business to a large business as well. Making sure that as we look at wage theft and wage enforcement through our Office of Labor Standards, you can perhaps be a facilitator and a convener, that the city's role should not be to put businesses out of business, but should be to support them and train them. So I think just being available and making sure that you have the infrastructure in place. But I think I put the burden back on the city to make sure that we are listening to you, because quite candidly, I think some of the voices have gotten lost in recent decisions throughout the last several years.
Thank you. So transitioning now to the topic of public safety. We all know in recent years we've had many issues along the lines of public safety, including things such as property crime, the effects of drug use, RVs being parked in places all over the city. What do you see as chief cause of these problems or challenges, and how do you propose to work with different organizations across the city, like Chambers of Commerce or Seattle Police Department or homeless advocates, different organizations? How would you work with them to address some of these issues?
Well, a few things. One is, I resent the fact when people look at what we're seeing now, which are, again, what you just described, and they're blaming either a mayor or former city council members, including myself, for what really is decades and decades of underfunding in mental health, the results of income inequality, underfunding in drug and alcohol and substance abuse, underfunding in special education. And I say that what's happening in our country, as a person who, again, has been here their entire life, that you see in major cities where we've had the kind of growth we've had. We have to remember that a couple of years ago, we had 1,000 people moving here per week. Again, many of these people are coming for jobs and opportunity. And when you have that kind of growth, and many of these people are higher wealth earners, higher income earners, that when you have that kind of growth, you've also created a smaller subclass of poverty as well. And so when I was a child in Seattle, where as a teacher or a barista or a food service worker or a retired vet may have been somewhat housing insecure or a little on the fringes in terms of economic security, they are almost pushing homelessness now. And so what we see is not the result of one failed policy, but what has happened to a city that has grown as quickly as we have, and who have experienced a growth in innovation and high tech and aerospace and health sciences. And, we're a port city, and our maritime growth, all of the things that have made our city great have also caused some of the problems we see. So what should we do about it? What are the answers? Well, first of all, we could sort of determine the predictors of someone that may fall through the cracks now in terms of being homelessness or showing an inability to be in mainstream society. So we start from 0 to 4, and that's why we, with leaders like Tim Burgess and others who are on the council, we started investing in pre-K, looking at brain development from 0 to 4. We then followed through high school to look at the Seattle Promise. I was the original architect of the 13th year, the first one to put money in a budget for kids that are not doing so well in high school. They just needed a year of tuition-free, tuition-paid assistance. It will turn into what I'm creating, a Seattle Job Center. And in our Seattle Job Center, this is a newly created department that I will start in my campaign. We will not only allow employers to see where the available employees are, and we're not trying to replace LinkedIn or Indeed or the Washington State Employment Office, but we're going to have a center there that's focused on job creation. And equally important, anyone that's interested in retooling themselves, whether it's a student or an adult, the available resources necessary to do that. There's so many good programs out there, many of which are free or subsidized, where a person could learn technology or establish an apprenticeship in the trades. And so we're going to put that all in a centralized department. So we're going to be very aggressive on retooling our whole city. And with respect to the homelessness, I actually believe we have enough money to solve the issue, that the city is not convinced the public that they're spending the money efficiently, and that we received $116 million of ARPA funds, and I was the only person to say that most of that should have gone to homelessness, not the sort of peanut butter approach I think was subsequently taken, because this is affecting public safety, quality of life, tourism, and affects the culture of our city. So I think we need to pay attention to that, which is affecting our quality of life the most. And so I'm going to create also a portal, Jason, a portal by which everyone can pitch in, whether it's $1 or $1,000 or $1 million through corporation social responsibility or individual donations, but they also can give their clothing away, or they can help retool someone with resume assistance. And so we're going to see a entity working very closely aligned with the city, and it's going to be completely transparent. So you can see the housing we're going to build, the cost per unit, the cost per person, and we're going to be now known as a Seattle that is strong and thriving in our approach to homelessness, very policy driven. And it's going to take that kind of effort, quite honestly. And you're not seeing any of that now. You're seeing inaction, and you're seeing people that have just sort of lost to despair, which has never been in my DNA. I'm a can-do, will-do kind of person. And that's the kind of mayor you're going to get from me.
Appreciate that. So moving over to infrastructure, and knowing that this is coming from the Magnolia Chamber perspective. So the Magnolia Bridge, as we all know, is reaching near the end of its useful life. Would you, as mayor, support the replacement of the bridge in its current location? If so, describe the necessary steps that you would see need to be accomplished to bring the financing together using, state elected officials, federal, and so forth. Or if you would not recommend that replacement of the bridge as is, what alternatives would you recommend?
Yeah, I'll answer the question with the data that I have now in terms of what seems to make sense just from what I have now. But I will reserve my right to have more interaction with those good folks in Magnolia to continue the conversation. So I would support a replacement, and I would support this being one of the priorities during our transportation package that will be up around 2024. That again, it's critically important, and it's a major thoroughfare to make sure that it is replaced and repaired, I should say. I'm not exposed to any data that suggests another route or another kind of repair other than repairing it would make sense at this point. So I certainly commit to doing that. The other comment I'd like to make is that I don't think, again, we have convinced the public that when we pass levies and we look for transportation dollars, that we are efficient with our money. And so I have to figure out through the use of disclosures and transparency and technology models how to impress upon people when they're investing in structures that the money is being spent wisely. Number one. Number two, that I will have a cabinet level position reporting to me whose purpose on earth are to seek state and federal funds, particularly for major capital projects, that this is not something you could just do reactionary. This has to be strong relationships built. We're hearing from the Biden administration that there are monies available. And so we'll be very aggressive in looking at all available revenue sources to get these kind of major capital projects done efficiently and on time.
Thank you. So moving now over to our final topic, 3 questions here in total about workforce in a post-COVID economy. So question 1 was, how would you work with local chambers such as ourselves to ensure thriving business development in neighborhoods like Magnolia?
And so number one, I've been doing walking tours throughout this whole campaign, and I've been on many tours with small chambers down at University District and Chinatown International District, downtown Seattle, West Seattle, and I will continue these for some time, and we'll continue them even while in office to listen to what the needs of the businesses are. For example, relaxation of regulatory hurdles around the built environment is something that it took COVID to let us realize that could be an economic driver for small businesses. And so I would like to see a lot of that to continue. I think that's sustainable. And so to the extent we can ease up. Someone told me that, the city is very good at fining small businesses when they are out of compliance, but very poor at helping small businesses, particularly when there were dozens and dozens of tents right in front of the establishments and the city was doing nothing. I'd also say, going back to public safety, that we know for a fact that ineffective public safety hurts small businesses. It helps their foot traffic, the clientele, and just the quality of life and the morale of employees. And so, again, I think I have I use the term effective public safety because right when I say effective public safety, some people may have this image of a different image. And so you may recall that, we're having a recruiting issue now, which will change under my leadership, and we're down hundreds of officers. So I will set the benchmark for a higher number of officers that we want. They'll be effective officers. And I think that will help out small businesses, many of whom are complaining about the public safety issues.
Okay. Next question was, what steps would you take to revitalize the Seattle economy and help rebuild downtown and other key business districts throughout Seattle?
So when it comes to downtown Seattle, I think we have to unfortunately recognize that a lot of the brick and mortar institutions will not come back. That because so much is done by e-commerce and within a post-COVID recovery time, that many of them were on thin margins to begin with. Therein lies the opportunity. And so I will convene civic leaders, philanthropic leaders, urban planners, community advocates, neighborhood advocates to sort of re-envision what the post-pandemic Seattle downtown should look like. I call it 1962 World's Fair Space Needle thinking, because somewhere along the lines, someone said, "Hey, I got an idea. Let's build a Space Needle." And he said, they probably laughed at him and that person. And someone said, "Well, no, I want to be a symbol of innovation and hope and aerospace and forward thinking." And of course, we know it sustains itself as a definition of what Seattle is till this day. I think now, coming out of the post-recovery period, realizing that Seattle has it all: maritime city, port, industry, aerospace, high-tech, global science, health science, educational facilities. We have a great hand. So having had this hand that we have, how do we optimize it and rethink and reimagine what downtown should look like? What kinds of attractions should be there? What will draw people in as opposed to other parts of the region? Going across the lake as an example. So I'm going to convene a group of leaders to help navigate this discussion, and it's exciting about some of the ideas that will come up. I don't want to talk about the ideas because we get hung up on the examples, but that's the process we're going to use to reimagine what a city will look like, given the fact that we have these economic drivers here.
Okay. So our final question off the questionnaire was, what are your business and workforce priorities? And specifically, how will you work with business and labor interests and city council to find consensus between these stakeholders?
Well, again, I'm sort of a proven commodity in this kind of work. When we decided to pass a minimum wage ordinance in the city, as opposed to it being on a statewide basis, I was called upon to be one of the lead negotiators. And so during those conversations, I was a strong advocate against income inequality, but also understanding that we didn't want to put small businesses out of business. And we also didn't want to lose the jobs to other jurisdictions. And so we looked at a tiered approach, a gradual approach. We looked at issues such as whether tip credit should be involved or whether a tuition assistance program for employees, if an employer provides that, should be involved. And these discussions will continue. And so that describes my approach. My approach is going to be very collaborative, recognizing again that cities will lose or win in the jobs war, and that small business owners, they go into business to employ people, to make a rate of return on their investment. They are risking their own capital, and the most important thing they're risking is their time, something we can never get back. And so they typically start that kind of venture to employ people and have a good quality of life for themselves and employees. So I will be collaborative. I will listen and be bold enough to propose ideas that may be outside of the box. That the last thing we want to do is to play not to win. We want to play not to lose, I should say. We want to play to win. And by winning, we'll have one of the best business environments for businesses and small businesses to thrive, for employees to grow, for our streets to be safe, and for those who are falling through the cracks. I'm introducing a healthcare for all model as well, because I do concern myself with anyone who doesn't have healthcare. So we are not going to succeed and leave others behind. We will truly be inclusive. And quite frankly, that's sort of part of my personal story of being inclusive.
Okay. So before we wrap up, Bruce, if you would just kind of give your final summary of, who you are, why you're running again, what you want to leave this audience with, and then also if you would help people find you, your website, things like that, so they can learn more about, you and what you stand for, and your campaign and so forth.
Thanks, Jason. So my website is Bruce for Seattle, bruceforseattle.com, and you can sign up there. And I'm going to ask people right now, I'm shameless about this, for help. And help in the forms of just, if you like what you're hearing from me, that these are tough races. And I run the race much like I run my life and the kind of mayor that I will be. And I don't denigrate others. I trust that they're trying to solve the same problems. I try not to embarrass anyone other than myself on occasion. But I truly run an optimistic and a hopeful platform. The kinds of things that I've seen in this city that, again, I love Seattle, and it's my passion for this city that is driving me out from retirement. I gave the city 12 years of my life, and my wife and I have been in Seattle, for a long time. And I will tell you that I got pretty inspired because I saw the inaction. When George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and we as a country witnessed that tragedy, and I dealt with a lot of my friends on the issue, I asked the question, so what's the end game? Yes, stopping unreasonable force, that's the end game. But what about disparities in health, disparities in job opportunities for everybody? What about having new discussions on race relations, making sure that not only do we recognize our differences, but we love what we have in common as well. And again, I became energized when I talked to young people and old about me being the first mayor of Asian descent and the second mayor of African American descent. And I said, well, that's all fine and dandy, but if I don't get the job done, which is redefining this city, getting us on the right track, helping small businesses, helping neighborhoods, reclaiming our parks, our quality of life, fighting for climate change, all of these things, if I don't do that, I'm just a first of something, then I have failed. And I will say this, that I'm a person of my word, and when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And if I leave you with that, it will be that I'm a person who says, if I'm going to do something, it will get done. I do not make mistakes. The buck stops with me as mayor. The homelessness crisis stops with me. Effective public safety stops with me. I won't point the fingers at the councilor or anyone else. I'll write it on my shoulders, and we'll get it done. So it's bruceforseattle.com. And I'll tell you, if there's policies in place right now that are working against you, this is how you think this is working against what you believe in, then I need people to not treat Seattle as a spectator sport. Come on the team and join the BruceForSeattle.com movement, Jason.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate you taking the time both to fill out the questionnaire and especially to have this time to really speak to what your heart is for Seattle. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the time and effort that you're putting into this.
Thank you, Jason. My pleasure.
Good to have you today. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.